we're going to pass around the sign-up sheet and donation bucket. Please sign up so we can stay in touch with you about upcoming events. We are a volunteer organization. No one is being paid to be here, and we run on donations from the community and from our own pockets. Your donation today will help us plan more events like this in the future. So I feel we can start passing out the sign-up sheet. Now, if everyone could please take out your cell phones. Let me see them home. If you don't already, please like the PSL Rhode Island page on Facebook. I'm going to give y'all a minute to do that. Thank you. So today we'll be reading a Marxist perspective on abolishing the police, and we'll be having a couple short presentations. We invite you all in discussion and encourage you to take notes on the presentation and reading. Please write down any questions or thoughts you may have so we can discuss. Before we begin, I think it's time for some context. From the murder of Emmett Till to today, the demand to jail killer cops have been a central demand of the families of victims of racist police terror and the Black Freedom Movement. In nearly every single case, the call has been for U.S. state, the local government, and federal government to indict, convict, and punish the police to the fullest extent of the law. The movement against police brutality is composed of oppressed people who demand that the government follow its own laws and to disband the two-tier injustice system. Police brutality affects the entire working class, and this is no different here in Providence. Rhode Islanders have taken to the street against racist police terror following the non-convictions of Breonna Taylor's murderers. A group that have identified themselves as young abolitionists took to the streets. On the first night, they were faced with excessive use of pepper spray, shoved and told, "Run or die, or do you want some?" The protesters were then forced to climb over a fence by Rhode Island State Police instead of safely exiting the ramps just a few yards away. Media and people with limited mobility were forced to throw over their canes and get assistance climbing an 8-foot fence. It's not hard to think about what happened on that same highway just 3 years ago when police shot a vehicle dozens of times, killing a passenger that they incorrectly identified as an escaped inmate. Over the past several weeks, the abolitionists have faced down by local law enforcement. There have been multiple arrests and thousands in fines. In response to the national uprising against police terror, many political prisoners have been created overnight. Over 15,000 political arrests have been made nationwide, 11,000 of which were made in the first 10 days of the uprising. On September 17th, 5 lead organizers in Denver, 4 who are members of the Party for Socialism and Liberation, were surrounded by police as they were driving, while they were at their workplaces and in their homes. One of our comrades, Joel, could have suffered the same fate as Breonna Taylor when the SWAT team and tanks threatened to bust down his door without showing a warrant. After these brutal arrests, the anti-racist organizers were detained under 23-plus-hour lockdowns for 8 days and were illegally detained, the right to see a judge till bond can be set. They are each facing multiple false felony charges with sentences that could amount to decades in prison. One of the most ludicrous charges they face is kidnapping police officers for leading a demonstration that surrounded a police precinct. The officers claimed they were afraid to leave the precinct because of the unarmed protesters. But how could dozens of police officers armed to the teeth with military-grade weapons have the legitimate fear of unarmed anti-racist protesters? In reality, this is a coordinated attack by several Denver police departments and the DA to crush the righteous movement for justice for Elijah McClain, and our comrades have been leading in Denver and Aurora. It is an attack on the movement that is challenging the power of the police and the DA. It is an attack on a movement that is building a multinational working class unity and shining a spotlight on the criminality of Denver and Aurora police departments. It is a political attack. The DA would rather frame a of organizers leading a movement for injustice for Elijah McClain, then jailed the cops that drugged and murdered him. While charges have not been dropped, our comrades are out on bond only because of local and international support. Progressive and anti-racist forces from Denver Area Labor Federation to the Socialist Party of Zambia, Communist Party of Puerto Rico, and the Communist Party of Sudan have stood in solidarity with our comrades in the entire movement fighting against racist police terror. Our comrades are only free now because organizers around this country understand this isn't just about the PSO. If they come for us today, they can come for y'all tomorrow. The ruling class forces in Denver viciously attack leaders of the movement to achieve justice for Elijah McClain for one reason, to try to scare and intimidate us. But within 48 hours, thousands of people flooded the streets of Denver to demand justice for these leaders to be released, and the killer cops who murdered Elijah McClain face charges for their crimes. Still, the United States doesn't acknowledge that there are political prisoners here. Those of us who demand justice for racist killer cops are under no illusion from the nature of the police or the incarceration system. And do not develop illusions about the system that the killer cops are charged with murder. Some police officers are only being charged with murder because of the power this movement is building. This is a far cry from full justice and social transformation that is needed, but to refuse this limited retribution is to let murderous cops off for free. In the here and now, before a socialist revolution that smashes the capitalist state and empowers the oppressed and working class, the capitalist legal process unfolds into a series of binary choices. The killer cops will either be arrested or not arrested, charged severely or lightly, convicted or found innocent, and sentenced lightly or harshly. The vast majority of oppressed people in the struggle, the backbone of any revolutionary movement, will demand that at each step the cops receive the strongest punishment possible. And the cops will wage the most desperate struggle to avoid any form of accountability, punishment, and consequence. The desire for justice and punishment represents the legitimate aspiration on the part of the exploited to power to impose their will over their bosses, racist cops, in their reign of terror. The important thing about a demand is not how inherently revolutionary it is, but whether it helps draw the masses of people into the struggle with the class enemy. The state's failure to meet these demands, which the masses of people hold necessary and achievable, is what we can create a highly combustible, even revolutionary situation. Word. So for the next section of the program today, we're gonna split into, I believe, 2 reading groups. We could just split like right in the middle. Facilitator, Yesenia and myself will each be leading a study group. We're gonna allocate time to read the article together and then have discussion.